All right, YouTube, congratulations to Nancy Pelosi for retaining her job as House Minority Leader, thus proving what I said was probably going to be the case, which is the Democrats haven't learned their lesson, not even remotely. Nancy Pelosi is the literal face of sort of the Democratic fundraising corporate neoliberal insiders. The fact that she's going to maintain her job, even though she faced more pressure than I think she wanted to, than she expected to. It was a bit of a struggle there for a while, but she did retain her position. It shows that the DNC, the Democratic Party at large, certainly the power structure of the Democrats, the same people that didn't give any alternative to Clinton, and they had to drum up an independent socialist from the middle of nowhere here in Vermont to run against her and run a serious campaign, even though the DNC made clear he was never actually capable of winning. They pulled out all the stops to let her win. It shows that they're gonna do the same thing again, which means that my new prediction is the Democrats will suffer another defeat in the midterms. The size of that defeat will be partially related to what Trump does and how well approved of it is. If he sticks largely to fiscal issues and foreign policy and goes back to sort of the pre-Iraq War era general feeling of, yes, indeed, we're not stoking up the Cold War, we're interested in working with all of these countries, we're interested in as well protecting U.S. jobs through our trade deals, scrapping some of the crappy deals, lowering taxes, he's going to be fairly popular. It's almost a return to pre-9/11 business when you think about the way that Trump talks. I think Trump may comprehend the fact that all of the crap we've done since 9/11 undid all of the benefit after the fall of the Soviet Union. We had run ourselves into the ground. We destroyed the Soviets in the process, but we ran ourselves into the ground socially and economically to defeat the Eastern Bloc. That happened. For a few years, things were fine. It was like Ace of Base and Taco Bell years, and lots of Windows 95 computers and stuff. And then 9/11 happens. We went back to the old way of doing business. The problem being our strategies for dealing with non-state actors have never caught up to our capabilities with dealing with state actors. Getting Russia, for instance, on our side. Putin is now declaring that Russia needs friends, Russia's willing to work with the U.S. on terrorism. That'd be great. It would skyrocket our economy because people would no longer be paranoid about the eastern part of the world. They'd be worrying about terrorists, which ultimately, at the end of the day, are less capable to actually do our nation harm. A lot of people, they're terrified of like, oh, ISIS, Al-Qaeda and stuff. Yeah, they conduct attacks all the time. Maybe someday they get a dirty bomb, but are they capable of fielding thousands of nuclear weapons? No. It would de-escalate world tension. It doesn't change my estimation that a nuclear war in the long term is inevitable. If not with Russia, you might see the rise of a more warmongering China. We see that kind of now. You might see an escalation of the India-Pakistan sort of region, or maybe Israel decides to go rogue and nuke Iran, nuke Syria, or something like that. But at the same time, with Pelosi in command of the Democratic Party, it's not like they're going to be able to offer any alternative that they didn't already offer to people in this election. That's why they were defeated. Hillary Clinton ran a standard campaign in a totally non-standard election season. She ran an establishment campaign in a year when part of the population, including working class white Democrats especially, were anti-establishment. You get some of that Reagan Democrats movement back on board in the Rust Belt. This is why Trump won. Has nothing to do with the popular vote. That appears not to have ever been his intent in the first place. I think he knew that the blue vote would get driven up in states like California, where he would be pissing people off with some of his rhetoric, especially with the media to fan the flames. But he had to focus on a handful of states in the Rust Belt. He did. He won. Get over it. Pelosi is the symbol of everything the Democratic Party did wrong in this election. Alienated white voters alienated white female voters especially, taking the vagina wedge issue totally off the table by lambasting whites the world over. Pissed off at least a segment of Hispanics and black voters. They went for Trump at higher levels than they did for Romney. Meanwhile, while the media and the Democratic Party cast him as the next Adolf Hitler. Think about that for a moment. They have to be pretty pissed at the Democrats. If he hadn't pissed them off, probably would have been 10 points ahead. He probably would have won the Hispanic vote if it hadn't been for that specific problem. I mean, he had to in order to target the Rust Belt, but now you're going to see a conciliatory Trump who nonetheless is going to go total cutthroat mode against his enemies. He's now President-elect Trump, and he hasn't changed the way he does business. He's still doing the tweet storm thing. I think mostly that's a good thing. It's a way to completely disarm the Democratic Party. It's like with his flag-burning tweet. Now, I pointed out that it was unconstitutional from the perspective that I didn't want anybody to take that seriously in an unironic fashion. I am well aware of why he was making that tweet. But at the same time, it is funny to watch him completely lambaste his foes and they don't know how to react. They're not learning. It's like the Democratic Party is run by people who are not capable of using critical thinking. Now, part of that I think is obvious, but you'd think there'd be a few people in the Democratic Party who would be intelligent enough to do so. Pelosi's not one of them. Pelosi's the person who says, well, you have to pass Obamacare to find out what's in it. Oh yeah, transparency? Who cares about transparency? Oh, Obama's great. He's a Nobel Prize winning peacenik who just happens to drone tens or hundreds of thousands of people. If we can get away with if we can get away from the type of business that we've been doing since Bush took office. It's not just Obama, it was Bush too. There's a reason that Trump ran partially against the Bush legacy as well. If we can get away from the post-9/11 way of doing business and back to the way things were in the period between the fall of the USSR and the rise of global terrorism with 9/11, if we can get back to that sweet spot period, it'll be great. Oh, people will be so much more relaxed, taxes probably will go down, social alienation will decrease, the racial issue will move back to the back burner where it belongs, there's no reason for it to be on the front burner. Things would be better off in this nation, honestly. The Democrats, meanwhile, have structured their entire campaign strategy around stoking these problems. We saw it on full display. Stoking the flames of the race issue was a big thing for the Democrats this election. It started getting old towards the end, which is why it failed. Stoking the glass ceiling, vagina card, which obviously didn't work. It certainly didn't get white women on board with Hillary Clinton, which is a block she had to win handily with. Stoking certainly almost xenophobic elements within the Democratic Party, which is, I guess, the funny part. When you think about their rhetoric about Russia, everything under the sun is somehow the fault of this other country that's a shadow of the Soviet Union. Yes, they're still a nuclear state. Yes, they're a competitor. Yes, at times they're a foe as well. But are they really responsible for every cyber attack that happens in the country? I'm thinking not. I think China might be a little bit closer to the correct answer there in most regards. China, North Korea, maybe some of these other states. I don't think it's all Russia all the way down. No, I don't believe that. It's some Cold Warrior crap right there. I don't hate the Russians. I have a problem with Russia. They should stay out of our sphere, and we should leave them alone when they're operating in their general neck of the woods. That doesn't include, by the way, places like Latvia or Estonia or Finland, so hands off. They take back Crimea. The globalists right now that are telling you to be terrified of Russia because they're in the Crimean Peninsula didn't even have a contingency plan in place for such a happening. They didn't even have the ability to do anything about it. So why are they so worried? Why are they whining about it now? The time to do something was when it was actually happening. Now it's a dead issue. They're the ones that failed. It wasn't a bunch of Trump alt-righters or quasi-nativists that lost Crimea to Russia. It wasn't any fault of some outside group. It was the fault of people like Obama and Merkel who were completely toothless to do anything about it. So, I mean, who gives a fuck? If the Ukrainian people want that land back, they're more than capable of fighting for it. The time to admit them to NATO was before the struggle began. Yes, it would have been a provocation. It also would have been an expansion of Western power. We could have done that. It would have been fairly easily a simple statement. Yes, NATO considers that this state is a candidate for NATO membership. Therefore, if they are attacked, we will consider it an attack upon NATO. That's all you had to do. You think Putin would be crazy enough to get involved at that point? No. Maybe some rebels here and there. That's about all you'd have to deal with. But you didn't do that, did you? And people like Nancy Pelosi are even worse. They seem to think that it's a good idea to constantly provoke the Russians, to constantly browbeat them, to constantly declare that anything that happens, you got gum on your shoe. Damn it, some Russian agent must have put it in the way. That's not the way that the real world works. There's a reason why the Democrats lost. They didn't even retake the House and Senate. It's not just Hillary Clinton was a weak candidate. It's not just Hillary Clinton didn't know how to do anything that didn't involve wedge issues and is probably in bad health, and let's face it, by 2020 may not even be in the land of the living. She might stroke out again and end up a grinning vegetable lying in state at some point. It's not just because of that. The whole Democratic apparatus is weak. They didn't, and they're not learning their lesson. That's why Pelosi's still in her position. They're going to lose the next midterms. You might end up with another Republican supermajority in the House. Who knows how much they'll gain in the Senate? They have a little further to go on the Senate side than on the House side, but certainly it's within their means, especially if Trump is halfway popular. If he outshines at least the Bushes and Obamas and becomes an average president, he's going to look stellar by comparison to these other fucking losers. Herbert Walker and Bubba Bill, who gets his dick sucked, and little baby W. Bush, who's just a total cowboy warmonger, and Obama, the covert warmonger, Nobel Peace Prize winning bullshit artist, who's basically just the black Justin Trudeau at this point. Yeah, you've got 4 presidents in a row who are abject failures. And Reagan wasn't much better, let's face it. Reagan was an average president. Trump only needs to be an average president to be the new Reagan. Therefore, it's not that hard to do. He's primed. He's in the right position right now, the way he's set himself up. He's in a position to do that, if he works at it. If he constantly just takes to Twitter and rambles constantly, doesn't get anything accomplished, it'll wear thin after a while. It'll be like when Obama was like, oh, yes, we can. Yes, we can. And no, we couldn't. That's the problem. It'll be just a cult of personality sort of bullshit. But I don't think he's going to do that. I think once he's actually inaugurated, he's going to work first on the economy and rebuilding some of our foreign relations, especially in strategically important parts of the world. That includes Russia. It's like I said, if Hillary had been elected, she couldn't conduct diplomacy with Russia. She spent a year blaming them for everything that went wrong in her life. The Russians hacked the DNC. The Russians hacked my emails. The Russians want Trump to win. The Russians are evil people. They want to fire their nuclear missiles at us. Be afraid, America. Be very afraid. It was like watching Joe McCarthy campaign for the presidency and wearing pantsuits. Although he probably did that in private anyway. There's some tales about his preversions there. And Dr. Strangelove mention that has to slip in there. No, I'm glad Trump won. And I'm kind of glad that the DNC is fucking itself. Which is what they're doing. Having Pelosi in there is screwing the Democratic Party. When they lose the midterms, which is now extremely likely, because they're going to try to pull the same thing they did the last time, which didn't work quite clearly, their party will begin to fracture. And from the ashes of the Democratic Party might come, after so many generations of the Democrats not knowing what they're doing, maybe we'll get another JFK or something. Maybe they'll end up becoming a decent party that's worth considering to vote for. I have no problem. It's like when people say, oh, you're giving advice to the enemy. The Democrats aren't my enemies. It's the neoliberals who run the Democratic Party that are the problem. If you had some JFK Democrat, that'd be fine, like a Jim Webb. Somebody like that. I don't have a problem with Jim Webb. He's a sane, sensible individual. I wouldn't mind if they made him Secretary of State, although they won't. It's people like Pelosi, like Feinstein, like Barbara Boxer and Hillary Clinton. That's the problem. And the far lefties don't help. They're fracturing their own party, too. People like Sanders. Sanders isn't even a Democrat. He's an independent. He's further left than people like Elizabeth Warren. Then you do have the Warrenite bloc. They're crazy. They ruin our economy if they get elected. We begin to look like a potato patch, honestly. But at least it's a change. They're not neoliberals, at least. More or less. They're kind of neoliberal light, I suppose. It's like Trump. He's not 100 steps removed from the neocons. He's not even a paleocon, he's a mild reformer. But it's a step in the right direction. It makes the Republican Party potentially worth voting for. Potentially not going to do stupid shit at least all of the time, as it did under W, as it has under Obama. Just like the Democratic Party has. What alternative was offered to George W? John Kerry. Wow. Wow, what a treat. What a wonderful guy. See, the only problem is he's not. He was basically just the taller, more boring version of W. People at least thought W was hilarious and decided they wanted 4 more years of Bushisms. That's what they're going to decide. Even if Trump has half-assed, people are going to look at him, say he's entertaining, and at least he's trying. The Democrats obviously aren't, so fuck him. And he'll win re-election. Now, hopefully he decides not to settle upon his laurels and be an average president. I want to see him do as well as he can when people are saying, oh, I hope Trump fails miserably. So you want our country to be led by somebody who's going to run it into the ground? Okay. Sounds like a great idea. Now, you first. That's about all. Peace out.